I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
It is a Hump Day Wednesday. Is that correct, Eddie? My days are starting to run together.
Yes. Mike. You remember that commercial?
Oh, that's the camel, right?
Yes.
I just remember him saying, I thought you said my mic was on. I just remember him saying Hump Day, right? Yeah. It is a Wednesday. How are you? My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison, the other voice that you just heard on this program, it is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan. And today is...
Jake, should I make an open? Like a custom open for like a Wednesday like I do for Friday? We've got the working for the weekend.
Yeah, what would we do for Wednesday?
Well, we can include the Hump Day, the Mike.
I feel like today on a Wednesday, at least in terms of today's show, it should be like the theme music for Shoe Carnival.
Did you ever get on Vine? Did you ever get on that social media app?
Which one? I'm sorry.
Vine. It was like back when I was in like middle school, high school.
For the 3 weeks that it was hot, right?
Yeah, there was a guy down there that went, "It's Wednesday, my dudes." Can cut that one out.
Can you find that? Because Vine was big for about as long as Periscope was, right? It was a thing, and then it wasn't a thing. But today, if there was a theme song, it would be, and I don't even know if these stores still exist. Do shoe carnivals still exist? Can anybody let me know?
I think there's still one in Greenwood.
Really?
I think so.
You would walk in, and they would say, like, hey, welcome to Shoe Carnival. We got a drawing here. We're going to get you come up, spin a wheel, 20% off. But they would have this cornucopia of when you walked in, it was like you never knew what shoe was going to be on sale. You never knew what the big bargain of the day was going to be. And, it was a carnival.
Wednesday, my dudes.
Okay. You dug that up from the social media graves of yesteryear. Did you have to look on that guy's MySpace page to find that?
Funny enough, Jake, I've never had a MySpace page.
Well, it was gone by the time that you were like old enough to know what social media was, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that.
Why did MySpace go away and Facebook lasted? I don't know. They're basically the same thing. At any rate, today is a Shoe Carnival day because there are a number of things to talk about. There are a number of different things that we're going to get to. There are a number of different teams to discuss, a number of different schools to get into. I mean, we have Indiana State in the discussion. We have Purdue in the discussion. We have Indiana in the discussion. We have the Pacers in the discussion. And we have the Colts in the discussion. So we've got a little bit of everything. And the Pacers in action tonight taking on the Toronto Raptors. That game 7 o'clock at the Fieldhouse. Also Purdue in action tonight taking on Iowa at that game 6:30, I believe, on the Big Ten Network. But let's begin with the big story as it continues and as we build up towards Monday night. And when it comes to Indiana, I got to thinking about this last night, and this was not at 3:48 in the morning while I was staring at the ceiling during a brain drop. This was actually while I was watching the game. A strange thing happened last night. And I want to be very clear here that I don't mean this, and I promise you, because I do think that in particular on social media, sometimes you can put something out there that people interpret it or digest it as a slander or you're being pessimistic or you're being sarcastic. And that's not always the case. I mean, you're like, no, I'm just actually addressing or illustrating a point here. And that's what I'm about to say here. This is not a poo-poo it or whatever else. It's almost more of, as I do a lot, an airing of the temperate. I'm putting my finger to the wind of the sports fans of Indianapolis and asking them if something that I have noticed, if it is in fact true to the masses. I'm watching the Indiana game last night at Michigan State. And I'm watching the game because I was out doing some things. I got home, actually got to Shannon's specifically, and I'm looking at my phone, and I immediately see from someone like an update on the score, and my first thought was, oh, that's right. Indiana's playing right now against Michigan State. Now, there was a time, and I know I'm not a kid anymore. There was a time when, as a kid, all the way well into my young adulthood probably, I had an IU sign or a banner that I would hang in the window for every game. Every game day I would hang it. And I was superstitious about where it hung and which ways it would hang, but I knew the schedule off the top of my head. I knew, Tuesday they're in Iowa, then on Saturday they're going to host Wisconsin, whatever it might be. I was a kid, a little bit different era, but it was also a different era in terms of the fanaticism and the success rate of Indiana basketball. And as I turned on the game, I turned it on and I was like, whoa, what in the world happened? Because I had forgotten the game was on, but I saw that it was a tight game, so I turned it on. And right as I turned it on, I noticed the scoring disparity. I think it was a 29-point game at that point. And I'm like, wow. And just then the announcer says the run for Michigan State was 26-2. And I thought, 26-2. 26 out of 28. 26-2. And immediately, my weird Jake Query brain went, that's Curt Cignetti's record at Indiana. 26-2. And then I realized it's odd to think that I, Jake Query, who can read off to you the final score of every game of the 1987 NCAA tournament, who can tell you the game by game of the 93 Hoosiers, etc. 2002, which I realize is still ancient history. But it dawned on me then that the Indiana basketball program, while still one that we talk about a lot, is number one playing in the shadows of what is one of the best teams in college basketball, and I believe top to bottom in terms of totality the best team in the country in Purdue. I watched Kansas last night annihilate Iowa State, knocking off yet another unbeaten. But as I was watching it, that's when it dawned on me. 1 year or 2 years does not a period make, or an era. But are we starting to see a shift? Not just in the concerted effort from Indiana as an athletic department with their football program, but for their fan base. I don't think I'm alone, and I wouldn't say in 2025 or 2026 that I'm necessarily an Indiana basketball fan, but I grew up the most rabid of them. And I've tried very hard to emotionally attach. I mean, I finally, I went to school there. I'm an alum. And I don't know if it's transfer portal. I think this team is very likable. I think Darren DeVries seems like a likable guy. They have players. I think Lamar Wilkerson's very fun to watch. They play hard. Connor Enright plays very hard defensively. I mean, there are a lot of things about the team to like, except for that they really don't have any quality wins. You don't know the background of a lot of the players because you didn't watch them grow up before your very eyes. And more so, it seems like when Indiana, and it's an interesting, for all of the praise that the Indiana athletic department gets, rightly so, for making the move to get Curt Cignetti, I wonder if there will not be a long-standing hangover from them waiting 1 year too long to get rid of Mike Woodson. Because not only did they, in getting rid of Mike Woodson, create even further apathy from the fan base, bordering on outrage from the fan base, bordering on backlash from the fan base. But they also, in doing that, missed on the perception that that was their window to get Dusty May. And I think the thought process of people of what would it be right now to have Curt Cignetti running the football program and Dusty May running the basketball program is simply too painful a pill to swallow for people. And they're like, and as a result of that, they just emotionally have protected themselves from getting too involved or invested in the basketball team. And I don't know how long that hangover lasts, and maybe I'm totally misreading it. Maybe I'm totally misreading it. But the people I know, which are a lot, that are Indiana fans that went to IU, that have been devout basketball loyalists, acolytes of the basketball program, zealots for the basketball program, come hell or high water, holding on way too long to the possibility that this was the year it all comes back. Sitting around at 2 o'clock in the morning watching the watch shot on YouTube on repeat and going down rabbit holes of great shots and longing for the glory years. A lot of those folks, I think, now are so invested, rightly and understandably so, financially and emotionally in the football side of things, that it feels like the basketball program in Indiana is kind of like the NBA, where people are like, wake me up when the NFL season's over. And I never thought I'd say it. Not just because I never thought Indiana football would be in this position, but because I never thought Indiana basketball would put itself there as well. And maybe, just maybe, people are listening to me right now like, this guy's the biggest hater ever. I'm not. I promise I'm not. I'm asking a legitimate question, and I think to some extent I'm tapping into the subliminal insecurity that Indiana fans are aware of but don't want to admit it at parties, of the fact that they're like, I think in the last couple of years it has kind of turned on me. And it is just another game in the background. It's no different than when I'm flipping the channels and Minnesota and Iowa are on. And I know that's crazy to say, but I'm curious of it. And I thought, Eddie, did you watch Indiana last night? Did you watch the IU game?
I did indeed.
It's really pretty simplistic when it comes to IU. And I don't dislike the roster. Darren DeVries had like 3 months to put together a roster. I get it. I do. And maybe he does build them into a nice, solid program. But I think now we can come to the conclusion that it being back ever into the blue blood area of the Kansases, Kentuckys, Louisville's, Carolina. And yes, those teams have down years, but they don't have down periods. Indiana's in a down period. Right? They're in an ice age here.
Yeah.
But it's the same, this particular installment of it, I think it's kind of the same old song and dance, in the fact of, if their shots are falling, great. And if not, they're going to be in trouble. And they don't necessarily have the athleticism to be able to get their own shots, which is one of the challenges.
And of course, one of the key, transfer portal was the coach's son, and the coach's son has just been so inconsistent as of late.
And it feels like that's lack of athleticism, right? If he can't get his own shot, Wilkerson can kind of get his own shot and also has unlimited range, but he's hot and cold also, right?
I mean, Tucker DeVries has scored under 10 points in 4 of the last 6 games.
Yeah.
In the 2 games that he did, it was against Nebraska, and then I can't even remember who the other Siena.
We all anticipated that in 2026, on the 50th anniversary of Indiana's last unbeaten season, we all anticipated.
But like, we've seen him had good games. He had a good game against Louisville. He had 26.
We all expected that in the 50th anniversary, we would be pausing to see whether or not the Indiana football team would go undefeated in the season where Nebraska was one of the last 2 remaining unbeatens in the Big Ten. That's exactly how everybody saw it back in 1976. Now, I also thought about this last night as I was pontificating about this and getting caught up in the numbers of 26-2. I thought about this aspect of it. You might be a Purdue fan. You might be a Butler fan. You might be a Notre Dame fan. You might be a Colts fan. You might be a Pacers fan. No matter who you root for, you have to root for Indiana to beat Miami Monday night. You can be the guy from the old Farm Bureau commercials that is going up to his garage, or his attic, and pulling out the old French horn or whatever it was, trombone, hitting that first note and then hearing the ghosts of the rest of the Purdue fight song, and wearing your gold and black and parading around in the top of your attic. You could be that Purdue guy. You could be the guy that went to the Blue Bonnet Bowl, went to the Rose Bowl under Joe Tiller, went to the regional finals with Brian Cardinal, went to the Final Four when Purdue broke through with Matt Painter, and Zach Edey. You could be that guy. You could be the guy that has green and gold paint because you wear it on your face for every Notre Dame game. You stop at the hip hugger on your way up, or don't, because you're so happy and excited to get to South Bend.
What's the hip hugger?
What's that?
What's the hip hugger?
It's an entertainment establishment in Kokomo.
Okay.
I believe the bypasses hurt their business. But my understanding is there was a time, Eddie, I've been told, that it was basically the Midwestern All-Star team on weekends.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Is that where Peaches was?
The best of the best. There might have been some there. You can draw your own joke there. But
didn't JV make a friend named Peaches? That's what I was asking.
Yes, I believe that's correct. I think that might have been the hip hugger, yes. That could have been night moves, actually, now that I think of it. But I digress. You could be that fan of Notre Dame and you need to root for Indiana. You could be a fan of Butler that watches Hoosiers just because seeing the back garage of Hinkle Fieldhouse brings a tear to your eye when they open it up and the Huskers come in. And seeing the way the old Hinkle Fieldhouse was laid out and brought back to life for that movie. And thinking about Tony Hinkle. And then thinking about the progression of Barry Collier and Thad Matta nearly shocking Arizona and blowing out Wake Forest. And thinking about Brad Stevens taking over and Todd Licklider and all the things that have happened over the course of history with Butler basketball. You can think about that, right? And you could be that Butler fan and you should still be rooting for Indiana. And here's why. Monday night is the opportunity for the Indiana Hoosier football program to finally slay the jinx that has taken place since even before the ghost of Hank Baskett. He's still living. I don't mean ghost. The spirit of Hank Baskett. Indiana in 2002 made an incredible run to the Final Four. They beat Duke. Awesome. A.J. Moye blocks Carlos Boozer. Jay Williams misses the free throw. Jeff Newton gets the rebound. Indiana wins. Complete exultation and spilling into the streets in Bloomington. And then they beat Oklahoma and Kelvin Sampson in the Final Four, and they go to the final game. And Jared Jeffries has a putback that puts them up with like 6 minutes to go. And then Juan Dixon and Chris Wilcox and the group from Maryland end up beating them. And Indiana falls short. And you think about Butler. The incredible story of Butler going to back-to-back Final Fours. Having a chance in that Connecticut game that just everything came to a standstill in terms of their offense. And the year before, the miraculous shot from Gordon Hayward that almost went in after one of the most incredible blindside screens you'll ever see from Matt Howard. But they just fell short. And Notre Dame, putting together all of a sudden on a couple of occasions, teams out of kind of nowhere that find themselves into the college football playoff or with a chance to win a national championship and wake up the echoes. And here they are. They're going to go in and they're going to take on Alabama. And they get blown off the field. Here they are. They're in the semifinals. They got to take on Clemson, and they get beat pretty soundly. And then, obviously a year ago. And then this year, you know what happened with them not getting in and getting snubbed, if you were to believe that, in the sake of Miami. But to get right on the doorstep, and it fell short. And I don't need to remind people about what happened with the Pacers just 6 months ago. To have it so close. And I still believe, as everybody does in this state, you are a citizen of Indiana. You are officially a Hoosier so long as the following takes place. You've had a breaded tenderloin at some point in your life. You attended or were asked to attend a high school basketball game or shot baskets in your driveway. And you are convinced that if Tyrese Halliburton did not go down, Indiana was going to win that Game 7. Those are the rules to live in this state. And it was right there in their grasp. And we know what happened. And the Colts, yes, had won a Super Bowl and delivered for this town, but It was the owner that said multiple Lombardis. It was the owner that said, I'm not worried about the Star Wars numbers. It's multiple Lombardis. And they had the greatest quarterback arguably to ever play the game. And they won the Super Bowl, and you thought to yourself, they're going to win a ton of these. And then they get back to one more, and you have the Liz Frank injury, if I'm saying that correctly, to Dwight Freeney's foot. But you also had the onside kick, and then the Tracy Porter interception, and that one got away. And that was part of this trend in Indiana. We're as good a sports town with as good a sports fans as you can find anywhere in the country. But we also are pretty thick-skinned, and we're a pretty tough lot. And we're a hard-nosed group of people when it comes to our sports. Because not only do we have to go into – it ain't like if you live in Oklahoma and you're an Oklahoma fan, you got one guy in the office that went to Oklahoma State. Okay, great. But everybody roots for Oak City. And then everybody's probably a Cowboys fan. In Indiana, if you're an Indiana fan, you got Purdue fans, Butler fans, Notre Dame fans that you're constantly chirping with within the office. And for that matter, when it comes to the Colts, even though now I think we have pretty established a ubiquitous Colts culture, there are still people that lived here before the Colts came to town that have their teams from yesteryear. They're a Bengals fan, they're a Bears fan, they're a Steelers fan, whatever it might be. But collectively, no matter which team it is that you root for, we have been conditioned now to get right there and start all of a sudden getting those sugar plum fairies dancing in our head and going to bed thinking about the possibility of a championship. And each time that we're right there, it's like you feel like Charlie Brown when Lucy's holding the football. And I don't think it's going to happen now. I really do, and I cannot believe there is no way that a Notre Dame football fan, that a Butler basketball fan, that an Indiana basketball fan, that a Pacers fan, that a Colts fan, there's no way that any of them would have selected that the team that can finally snap the unwritten curse, even though or the unspoken curse, even though I just spoke about it. There's no way that anybody thought that team that was going to snap it finally and say, no, we got to the finish line and we burst through the banner before anybody else would be the Indiana football Hoosiers. Nobody thought it. Nobody thought it. And here they are. And that is why, collectively as a state, and I would say this if it were Purdue, I would say it if it's Ball State, I would say it if it's Evansville. It has nothing to do with the fact that I grew up going to Indiana football games. It has nothing to do with the fact that I loved Anthony Thompson and Vaughn Dunbar and Steve Bradley and Dwayne Gunn and Rob Turner. It has nothing to do with it and Babe Laufenberg. Not because of that I'm saying it. I'm saying it because we as a sports culture are owed it. They're not owed anything, but we're due it to finally get over the top. And I think Indiana's the team to do it. This Miami team is nasty. That defense, the more I think about it, that defense is darn good. And that defense, and I understand, I get that it gets old hearing a Dan Le Batard going on and on and on about Miami, but I understand it because if you look at what Miami did to Ohio State, they controlled that game. Indiana didn't control the game against Ohio State. They looked very good throughout it, and they made the plays they needed to make in that finite difference when it was on the line. But Miami controlled the game against Ohio State by keeping the ball predominantly out of Julian Sain's hands, by being aggressive defensively, and by making plays when they needed to offensively and having basically a 2-score lead throughout the game. So I understand why you would look at it as common opponent and go, why is everybody just assuming that Indiana is going to walk away? It's because of what they've been able to do so far in the playoffs, not turning the ball over, forcing 4 turnovers, and continuously going with next man up when a player goes down for any number of reasons and finding a way to get it done even when they've got to go into backup roles, and more on that in a little bit about where Indiana's depth might actually be coming from, like the most unlikely of ways or means. But I'm telling you right now, Indiana football is now the face for all of us, no matter who you're rooting for, because they're carrying it for a state. And when you really think about it, all of us collectively are due. And that's why you got to say, Hoosiers, come Monday night. Now, Pacers in action tonight, taking on the Toronto Raptors. Playing well. And a couple of players that you might not have expected are leading that way. And then, of course, Pascal Siakam, guy that will be on the television call for it. Chris Denari joins us next.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Pacers in action tonight. Toronto Raptors, the foe. Chris Teneri going to join us here in just a second. Real quick, I wanted to read this. This from BZ1585 on the X Post Twitter. There is no scenario that I would root for any IU team. Don't be ridiculous. I get it. This from Kurt. As a true Purdue fan, I want every IU team to lose every sporting event they're ever involved in. I get it. I totally do. I'm just saying symbolically for the state, when you really think about it, everybody has kind of had their turn right now at base camp of the mountaintop. And we need somebody to finally break through and break this. I'm not going to say curse, but just this momentary lapse before the title is won. Chris Teneri joining me now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. JavaHouse.com is the website. Jake 25 for 25% off. Chris, of course, the television voice of the Pacers. Chris, Pacers playing a little bit better. Obviously, I mean, you know, they've put together 3 wins in a row here. Rick Carlisle is now over 1,000 career wins. The most simplistic question would be this. What are they doing differently now that they were not doing before that has kind of put them on this little heater streak, relatively speaking?
Well, I think it really is pretty simple, Jake. They're making shots. I mean, that's one of the things. If you look at the month of January and these 6 games and the last 3 wins, they're the top 3-point shooting team at 43%. They're the number 4 field goal shooting team at 49%, and they're averaging about 115 points, which is number 8 in the NBA. And if you look at those 3 categories prior to January, they were dead last in scoring, dead last in field goal shooting, and dead last in 3-point shooting. So they've really done a much better job. I think getting healthier, getting guys like Aaron Nesmith and Ben Shepherd back, those are 2 really key guys to the way that this team wants to play, especially offensively, the way they move. And so I just think having a little bit more continuity, especially from an offensive end, has really helped them.
When you look, Chris, we'll start with Ben Shepherd. You know, I think sometimes we forget if a guy is not at 100% how it can impact him. And Shepherd is a unique one because I think his primary role is his ability to defend and then also to hit shots when in rotation he's open, but I don't know that they're necessarily designing for him to get those shots. Seemed to me like he was struggling for a bit there. Is that because of the non-familiarity of some of the people he was on the floor with, or was it a health thing? Or was he not struggling at all and I'm out of my mind?
No, he was definitely struggling. I mean, on the year, he's still only shooting 32% from 3. But if you look at his last 7, I'm looking at the numbers here, he's 11 of 22. He's shooting 50%. And if you go a little bit deeper than that, he's been even better. I think early in the year, some of that was maybe some unfamiliarity with teammates. He was also guiding the ball. He just didn't look very confident shooting the basketball. And so I just think he like Nesmith and Nembhard and Jarris Walker, who is shooting the ball pretty well right now. They've gotten more into a rhythm, into a groove. And when that happens, this is a team that can win games. There's no question about that. I mean, if you look at the success that they've had under Rick Carlisle the last couple of years, shooting was never a problem. Offense wasn't a problem. 2 years ago, when they went to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time, they averaged 123 points per game, and they had one of the all-time great offenses. Now, of course, they had Tyrese Halliburton leading the way, but this has been a team that has been able to make shots, and that was really a huge part of the problem early in the season.
Chris Teneri is my guest, Java House Peel and Pour guest line, television voice of the Indiana Pacers. Chris, I'm looking around the league, and I'm seeing, players that want out or players that are unhappy and, divas here and there. And it's not to say that Indiana has been immune to that. There have been players that have caused their fair share of, oil in the water here over the years, but this particular group does not seem to have that. Jay Huff has a reverse dunk, and the entire bench is going crazy. And Johnny Furphy hits a shot, and everybody's acting like he's the little brother they're proud of, and et cetera. And cohesiveness and chemistry is so important to the success, I think, of this installment of the Pacers. So my question is this. Do you believe that the bigger challenge is being able to scout a player and their character before you bring them into your franchise? Or is it harder to be able to assess how success, money, and wins can change that player once they are actually a part of it?
Well, that's a great question. And what's interesting about that, Jake, is the other night, Monday night, after the game against Boston, I did a sit-down with Ryan Carr, Ted Wu, and Spencer Anderson from our front office. And I think, they talked about that, just the kind of work that they do, not just looking at numbers, not just looking at productivity, but how these players relate as people to the coaching staff, to the organization, to family, those types of things. So I think that's, there's always going to be a wild card in the mix that you read the way you think somebody is going to act when things are good or when things are bad. But I think that's one of the things that this organization has done a really good job of doing that. And to your point, what you see when Jay Huff and Furphy and those guys make those plays, and you see the camaraderie on the bench, that's genuine. I mean, we've seen that over the last few years, and especially, I'm going to say, since Tyrese arrived. I mean, Tyrese infects and injects that enthusiasm with his teammates. And so I think that's something that, no question, the front office looks at when they're trying to build a roster, and each and every year is different, is how do those pieces fit together, and how can all these guys relate to each other in good times and in bad, right? It's not always good. I mean, think back to last year, as great as the season was, if you go back to December, they were 10-15 and I think 11th or 12th in the East. So it's not like the 24-25 season, was always riding high. So I think that's a great question. And I think what front offices try to do is make sure you are finding guys that fit the model that you have built.
Chris, what is the one area that you think most needs improvement? And listen, Jay Huff has impressed me. I mean, he has exceeded probably what I thought he was going to be as the year has gone on. He is one guy that I think has taken advantage of opportunity here and diversified maybe what he was able to show in the league before he got here. But if there's one area of his game that still needs the most improvement or solidarity, it would be what?
Well, he's got great size from a length perspective, but he gives up a lot of bulk inside, and so that can become difficult for the bigger centers, and that's why a lot of times you'll see Rick Carlisle make a change and go to Tony Bradley, who may not be as good offensively, but he's a little bit better rebounder and a better defensive player. And so, that's a situation that I think the Pacers have gotten some good play. You're looking at, Micah Potter has only played 10 games. They got him on Christmas Day. He started, I think, 10 games last year in Utah. Jay Huff started 2 games in his career before this year. Isaiah Jackson started, a handful of games in his career before this year. But I think they've gotten some really good play out of that center position. And I think when you get Isaiah Jackson back, it will be interesting to see how does Rick Carlisle utilize that rotation. Because Micah Potter's done a lot of good things off the bench. As you said, Jay Huff had an outstanding game against Boston the other night. And then Tony Bradley does what Tony Bradley does. So I just think that's going to be a position to watch, to see how they utilize those people and how they rotate them each and every game.
Every body is different. Every journey back from injury is different from one person to the next. Isaiah Jackson was a very athletic player when he had, with great bounce, to use a buzzword. But when he had his injury, which was the Achilles, that is the same injury that Tyrese Halliburton obviously will come back from. Have we seen enough from Isaiah Jackson? I know that he has not been able to consistently be on the floor this year. Have we seen enough to give some indication as to a timeline for Halliburton in terms of step or burst? Has Isaiah Jackson shown to you, Chris, that he is back to or close to what he was athletically pre-injury?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and again, the time that he's missed here, 12 straight games, is due to a concussion. No relation at all to the Achilles injury that he had a year ago. If you think about it, Jake, he was injured in early November, and was back as the season started in October. So he was inside 12 months. He was, about 11 months when he came back to the Pacers. So, no, I think you've seen a lot of burst. I think, he's a guy that I've always said it looks like he's on a pogo stick, the way he can jump around the basket. So I think, every player is different, but I think that bodes well. And I've been impressed at what I've seen on the road and Tyrese coming out before games at Gainbridge Fieldhouse and doing a little bit of a workout. I think he is right where he needs to be, right where he is on schedule. And I don't anticipate any problems when he suits it back up next year.
Chris, obviously with Isaiah Jackson, we play positionless basketball now for the most part. I get that. But his athleticism makes him bigger than he is, so to speak. I'm talking about Isaiah Jackson. If they get into a situation where, let's say, Huff becomes their backup center, they acquire a guy that becomes a starting center, could Isaiah Jackson, would he be in the center mix, or is he a guy that then slides over and gives them depth at the power forward position?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think one of the things Isaiah has worked at, and even though you don't see it in games, is, I see him in practice working on his three-point shot, more of a perimeter game. I mean, he's a guy that, bounces around the rim. I think that's the great thing about this coaching staff is that they can, take a player and, they don't have to just do what they've always done. There are other opportunities for you. So I think that's to be seen. As the season progresses, each individual player trying to become a little bit better at what they do, but also maybe do some things a little better at what they haven't done before.
Chris, when you were a kid, who was your favorite Pacer?
I'll tell you what, I really like Don Boosie. I
don't know why I knew you were going to say that.
Just because of the way he handled the basketball and the way he shared it and the way he shot it. I would say, Don was somebody that, that caught my eye, that was someone that you could, look up to and say, hey, I want to pattern my game after that.
Now, you played, obviously, in high school. Did you play for your dad, right?
Yes.
And then you went to Wabash, right, and you played at Wabash, right?
Yes. Yep.
Now, I saw a video recently when you were at the practice facility and there was a ball laying around, you picked it up and you were putting up some shots. And then I was curious. Were you, because you were a coach's kid, does that mean that you had a floor vision and you were a crafty facilitator, or were you an absolute trigger gun and you were putting it up every time you got the ball?
No, not at all. I played for my dad, and I sort of look back and go, man, I didn't shoot enough. But it was a different game then. I mean, we did not have the 3-point shot when I played. I mean, I think that tells you how old I am. But no, I like to get open off a screen and hit a little 15 to 17 footer. There wasn't that need to go out to 20, 25 feet because it didn't. You got the same amount of points,
right?
Whether you shot it from there or whether you shot it from 12 feet. So no, I was not the prototypical gunning coach's son.
Pacers in action tonight. Raptors, 7 o'clock tip at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Lastly, Chris, in terms of this kind of perk up of late for the Pacers and then into tonight, the player or the storyline that you are most curious to see in terms of a continuation or that you are looking to see positivity about so that you feel optimistic that this continues would be what?
I'm going to say two things. I could say three things. I mean, one's a given. I mean, Pascal Siakam's had a tremendous year. Andrew Nembhard has put up some just stellar numbers over the last 4, 19 points, 10 assists, nearly 50% from the field, 50% from three. But a guy that I'm really keeping my eye on, and I think these last two games against Miami and Boston, it's not just the scoring, but I think the overall games that Jarris Walker has played the last two games have been the type of games that we want to see on a consistent basis from Jarris. He had 11 points and 7 rebounds against Boston. He had 13, 9, 4 assists, 4 steals against Miami. I think he's a guy that's starting to be a little bit more consistent. So that's somebody I really want to keep an eye on tonight.
All right, Chris, we'll be watching tonight with the Raptors at the Fieldhouse. Appreciate the time as always.
All right, thanks, Jake.
All right, Chris Teneri joining me, Java House, Peel and Pora guest line. I mentioned earlier about Indiana and this run, and there are those that I think it is, and I'm talking about the Hoosiers, by the way, not just the Pacers' 3-game streak. The Indiana football story is one that I think sometimes you would think that it might come with mixed emotions or mixed feelings for some people. And then you go, no, it's a good enough story. I think there are people that can set aside any sort of resentment, for lack of a better phrase, and see simply the positivity in it and push out the chest. And I really did think about the Mallory family and Bill Mallory, who was the winningest coach in Indiana football history and took 3 different teams to a top 20 end-of-season ranking in his coaching career, a brilliant football coach. And yet, the way that and I know that he came back to work for the university, but he is one of those coaches. I've always thought Joe Tiller and Bill Mallory both elevated the profile of their program so much that they became almost victims of their own success because people thought like, well, now we got to take this to the next level, you know? And Bill Mallory, of course, no longer with us, but his family so entrenched in football. All 3 of his boys playing at Michigan, and Kurt Mallory now the head football coach at Indiana State. And, you know, his wife's still living and enjoying it. And so I wanted to know the Mallory. I think of the Mallory family, and I think Indiana football fans would agree with this. It is my belief that the Mallory family would be kind of the first family of IU football. And, yeah, there are others that could be in that category. I understand. But Kurt Mallory going to join us coming up just about 15 minutes, and I'm very curious to see just their family feel on all of this, that conversation in just under 15.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Several people have pointed this out, and I understand it. Jake, I get asked, were the Colts foolish to hold on to Shane Steichen knowing that Mike Tomlin might be available? And the Mike Tomlin availability is kind of like the snow that I'm watching sitting here falling outside right now on North Meridian. Like, there was the possibility of it, but you didn't know for certain whether it was going to happen. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, did we know this was happening?
When did that start happening?
About 5 minutes ago.
What in the world?
I'm sitting here watching all the cars circle in our parking lot like sharks trying to find an open parking
I'm
spot.
still not used to having a window and being able to look outside.
I know. We're mesmerized by it, right? Here are the jobs that are open. Right now in the National Football League, it is the second highest number of coaching vacancies that we have ever had. 10 is the record. There are 9 right now. Baltimore, the Giants, Miami, Pittsburgh, Arizona, Cleveland, Vegas, Tennessee, and Atlanta. The reality is this. I want you to give me a number 1 through 9, Eddie.
2.
Number 2, New York Giants.
2.
Okay? I think the New York Giants and John Harbaugh, I mean, there is reportedly he is very interested in that job.
He's got a formal interview with them.
And I think the Giants, there is some level of intrigue about that job to a lot of people because, number one, it's been a good franchise. Number two, they have a young quarterback that I think looks like he can grow into that role. And then number three, you know, you're kind of starting at the bottom there and you can build pieces around it, and that will intrigue people. Okay? Now, give me another number 1 through 9.
7.
I just wrote 9 of them down, and I'm just saying. So the 7th one that I've written down is Vegas. Vegas would be very intriguing because, number 1, you get to live in Vegas. Number 2, the Raiders. Great fan base, great history. But number 3, and most importantly, you have the number 1 pick in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
You have the number 1 pick in the draft. You have an elite-level tight end. You have what seems to be an elite-level running back. You have some foundational pieces. And that Vegas job, I think, is of intrigue. Now, give me one more number, Eddie, off the top of your head.
Number 1.
Number 1, the Baltimore Ravens. Goes without saying. Been a perennial playoff team in a division that is still wide open. Matter of fact, the divisional winner just fired their coach, right? Wide open.
Well, they didn't fire Tomlin.
You're right.
Tomlin stepped down because it's going to be like a Sean Payton in the New Orleans Saints situation.
You're right. You've got to give compensation to Pittsburgh. You're right. My apologies.
Yeah.
But a coaching vacancy nonetheless.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, my apologies there on the Tomlin firing because it was a resignation, but not a mutual parting. But either way, Baltimore intriguing. You got Lamar Jackson. I mean, you know, all those things. My point that I'm simply making here, it's hard for us to fathom this in Indianapolis. But it may just be that the Colts situation is the least desirable of any of them. Because you're coming in, if Shane Steichen had been ousted and you're looking for a head coach, you have a head coach that's coming in saying, I'm going to go work for a general manager that has not yet delivered a divisional championship to this team in 9 years, and they're not going to be able to deliver for me a first-round draft pick in the next 2 years, and the quarterback that I'm most likely going to be using is not under contract currently and is coming off an Achilles tear. Likewise, if you said, okay, well, then you keep Shane Steichen and you make Mike Tomlin your general manager. Any general manager wants to bring in their own coach and not inherit one and rinse and repeat on all of the reasons I just gave you that Indianapolis would be one that would give people pause. It's a hard pill to swallow. But the reality is I think there are other jobs out there by a lot and possibly even by all that are more intriguing or have better upside for anybody. Tennessee probably leaves a little to be desired. You get to play in a new stadium. You got a former number 1 pick at quarterback. Okay, great.
Cam Ward looked pretty good down the stretch of the season.
He did.
So.
I mean, he started to turn the corner a little bit there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're right.
Yeah.
Kurt Mallory is the head football coach at Indiana State. His father, a legend in Bloomington. Their thoughts on this run as the Mallory family. Kurt joins us next. Stop what you're doing, Indeed, because Indiana is in the college football national championship game. So stop the presses and I don't need to spell this out for most of you, but I will. Indiana football, a program that essentially lived in dormancy. And yes, went to the Rose Bowl. I get that with, Harry Gonzo and Eisenberger and, played USC and, fabulous. Had a great, John Pont had good teams. But really the true birth of the consistency of Indiana football and the time when people first got the taste of success. And I can tell you off the top of my head, it began with the All-American Bowl. Sammy Smith of Florida State went nuts, broke my heart. Then a mix of the Peach Bowl twice, the Liberty Bowl with Rob Turner running all over South Carolina, the Pull-On Weed Eater Independence Bowl, the Insight.com Bowl, which was the Copper Bowl, as it was known, Indiana's last bowl game until this season. And Bill Mallory is the man who is the winningest coach in Indiana football history that facilitated for so many great memories. And I think of as kind of the face of Indiana football. And unfortunately, of course, Coach Mallory no longer with us, but a two-time Coach of the Year, and now his son following in those ranks. Kurt Mallory is, of course, somebody who has been tabbed a Coach of the Year within the Missouri Valley, also at his level at Indiana State. Joins us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line to kind of speak for the Mallory family about this run for Indiana. Coach, first off, how are you? It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you today.
Let's begin with this, and before I get into kind of what it means, say, for your mom or your brothers and yourself, from a coaching standpoint, and somebody that I know, you've coached at Indiana, you played at Michigan, you've coached for a number of coaches, including Jerry DiNardo back at Indiana. Your overall just reaction and, I guess, synopsis of what we have seen.
Well, just thrilled, very excited for the program. And, I still have a lot of friends that played for my dad, and just watching their excitement, I couldn't be more excited for the program and them. And I know no one's more excited or looking down from heaven than my father.
When you think about that, because I said this earlier, Kurt, and tell me if this makes sense. I felt like, and I've always put Joe Tiller in this category as well, that Bill Mallory, to an extent, became victim of his own success at Indiana, because then all of a sudden Indiana fans, I think they just kind of took it as the program was the one that was, well, now we got to get to the next level. And I think maybe they took for granted how much work went into getting it to that beginning level to begin with. And I could see how that would have hurt your dad. Am I overreading that?
Well, I think he always looked how they were going to get better year to year. And, obviously they had great success. And, no one loved Indiana football more than my dad. And I'll tell you this, when he stopped coaching at Indiana, I think his love became even more. And I think a lot of it had to do with the relationships that he had with his players. And, I'd get calls from my dad, and he'd say, hey, I saw Kyron Supernog today. I said, where'd you see him? Well, I played golf with him today. Well, I saw Chris Lee. Where'd you see him, Dad? Well, he came over for breakfast. I think that's what he cherished the most, but no one loved the program more than my father.
Was it weird for you, or your brothers for that matter, Kurt Mallory, my guest, the head football coach at Indiana State, was it weird for you to play against Indiana when you were at Michigan?
Well, this is funny because, my wife would say to me, I'd be coaching at Michigan or I was coaching at Illinois, and my dad would come outside the locker room and she'd say, your dad's wearing Indiana gear. And my dad wasn't coaching at Indiana.
Yeah.
and I would laugh and I'd say, yeah, I know. But I never doubted who he was rooting for. I knew he was rooting for me, but his support was always for Indiana. Always. It never, ever changed. And so, we'd be home or come up, whatever, we'd come back after a game and he'd be like, hey, turn on the Indiana game. What's the score of the Indiana game? His love for Indiana never died. It only increased.
Whenever you think about any team, Coach, Little League team. One of the things I've always thought fun about big-time Division I sports or professional sports in general is oftentimes there's always a maternal figure in the background, right? And sometimes it's a player's mom. I know when Dominic Rhodes played for the Colts, his mom would make cookies for the team, that kind of thing. And oftentimes it's the coach's wife that's there in the background. Now, I went to Indiana. I was a student at Indiana in the mid-'90s. I know, a lot of guys that played football at Indiana. And there's this love for your mother, for Coach Mallory's wife, this team mom type feel, right? The first question I would have for you was, were you aware of that, of the fact that now suddenly your mom was a mom to more than just you and your brothers?
Well, 100%. My mom is the supporting cast of she's the rock. And, my dad would say that today, that could never have ever done it without her. And she was always there for him. She was such a great sounding board. And the players felt that, and they all, as well as they knew my dad, they knew her, and she was very much a part of it. She was always at their side. And, you always knew that, no matter what, you were going to have someone that was going to be a huge positive influence. And she was the rock of it all.
What does this run mean to her?
Well, I can just tell that she's just ecstatic, and just so thrilled for all the Hoosier Nation. She's a big part of that. She's just thrilled to death, and just, hearing her voice on the phone last night and just how excited she is, I can't put it into words.
Curt Mallory is the head football coach at Indiana State. He was a graduate assistant at Indiana, then came back and coached at Indiana at the assistant level, has coached a little of everywhere. You had Vontae Davis at Illinois, for example, so, your connections go all the way in even to guys that went on to play for the Colts. But I wanted to ask you before, and I want to ask you about Indiana State as well, actually, but for the job that Curt Cignetti has done in this turnaround, is there or would there be an understanding of whether it be Jerry DiNardo, who you worked under, or your father, if he was watching today, which we know he is in the spiritual sense, Bill Lynch, any of it, right? Terry Hepner, the same as your father. Would there be an understanding of, I won't say resentment or jealousy, but just kind of a longing for the resources that Curt Cignetti has and the investment to the program that wasn't always there? Is that a fair assessment of some of the things that Curt Cignetti has been afforded that were not there beforehand?
Well, I can only speak on my dad because I know how much he I know there would be no jealousy with my father or resentment. My dad, supported whether it was Coach Cameron, whether it was Coach DiNardo, Coach Hepner, Coach Wilson, Coach Allen. All he worried about, it wasn't about Bill Mallory. It was about the program. It was always the program first. And he obviously fought for some of the things that he felt he needed at that time to be successful. And there was things at the time, building the Mellencamp Pavilion, other things, the office space underneath the stadium, obviously more to it. But it was always going to be about the program first. But I can tell you, speaking for my father, zero resentment, zero jealousy, only just to be so thrilled to see the success that they're having now.
What do you equate it to? I mean, Curt, I don't know how well you know Curt Cignetti and just what he's, or how much you've interacted with him or crossed paths with them, but what has most impressed you about this?
Well, just who he surrounds himself with. I think that's where you see, and I've had some dealings with Coach Cignetti. He's been very generous, very kind, and letting some of my players that maybe have an opportunity to go down and work their pro day, and he's opened it up for us, as Tom Allen has while I've been here. And I've always been very appreciative of that. I've had an opportunity to meet with him, obviously, before we played, and just, the kindness and, some of the things that he's, taken the time, but just appreciative of that. And when you look at the success that he's having and listening to him talk, I hear him talk more about the we and the team. And I hear that so much from my father. And the people that you surround yourself with is everything. And when you look at it, I cannot go, in this conversation without mentioning Scott Dolson. And my dad thought the world of Scott, loved Scott Dolson. And Scott and I are similar in age, but when Scott and I were, we were around together in the late 80s when both basketball and football were at their peak. And, and to see that you can be successful in this state in both sports. It was being done at that time in the late 80s. Coach Knight was having great success. Bill Mallory was having great success with their programs. And Scott saw that. He was working with the basketball program. And I know him and my dad had such a close relationship. And I know it starts at the top. And I've heard Coach Signetti say that a number of times, how much he thanked Scott Dolson and the president. You would hear those same messages echoed from my father back in the day with President Ryan or the AD Ralph Floyd, and that you needed a supporting cast, and that's where it all starts.
How much, by the way, because I remember at the time, seemingly publicly, it was always a really good one and one of mutual respect. A couple of Ohio guys in Indiana. What was your dad's relationship with Bob Knight?
They had a great relationship. When my dad was coaching at Northern Illinois, Ralph Floyd had called my father, and then it was Bobby Knight, and they had a great relationship. They supported one another through thick and thin, and of course, I grew up, similar age to Pat, so they both had sons. They were kind of going through it at the time. But they always had such a great supporting and had mutual respect for what they were doing.
Kurt Mallory is our guest on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line, head coach at Indiana State. Coach, the Indiana blueprint now, and I'm not saying that becomes the blueprint for everybody, but NIL and transfer portal are such key ingredients perhaps to this. And Indiana has used that along with Scott Dolson, Kurt Signetti, the vision, as well as anybody. And I have been curious of this. Indiana's going out and getting portal players to accentuate or solidify their roster, and also having guys that they've developed from JMU come in and be able to kind of stamp for everybody, hey, here's what we expect from the culture of Kurt Signetti. How does that change the recruiting or the blueprint aspect of other programs? Do we live in a copycat league where people now are going to start looking more at, to use his term, productivity over potential? How does that then also, in any way, touch on or affect Indiana State?
Well, that's what we're trying to do here, and I've got a great staff, and and that's, and Coach Signetti's exactly right. Productivity over potential is the exact same thing. But what we look for here is a culture that guys are going to come in here and be part of our team, and be a part of our culture here. And you have to do a great job of evaluating that, and that they're in it for the team aspect. And I think anybody that knows anything about football, when you watch an Indiana coach team, they're very well coached. They don't beat themselves. They're very disciplined. And so when you watch them, they've done an unbelievable job of bringing guys in that fit what they want, the culture. And there may be better players. I don't know. I'm not there. But I know, being in the case right now, you may see some really, really good players that jump out at you on film. But it's more importantly that you get the right fit that fit what you're doing and what you want to do as you move forward.
Do you have to, when you bring a player into Indiana State, because the portal is such the reality now, Coach, and NIL and all of that, do you have to use that almost as a recruiting advantage, not to the point of even necessarily, hey, if you want to transfer here and get minutes that maybe eluded you where at your first stop or whatever else. But can you also use it for a younger player of, hey, you come here, I will develop you then where you can go to, and I don't mean this as a disrespect to Indiana State, but go into, say, a Big Ten program or, whatever it might be. How do you balance, I guess, the way that the yin and the yang of how it can hurt and it can also help you?
Sure. I think in our case, our recruiting is always going to start in the state of Indiana. It has and always will be as long as I'm here. When you go into the transfer portal, it's very important that you know what you're looking for. There's things that you have to look for when you're in the process of it. But the challenges are always the challenges. We're all doing this for the first time. But I think the thing you got to look for is what's the best fit for you and what it is as you move forward. But in the end, you can the highest level that I always talk to these young men about is the NFL. And you can reach the NFL when guys come to me and say, hey, I want to play at the highest level. The highest level is the NFL. And you can reach all your goals here at Indiana State by being here. And we've got guys playing in the NFL that played here at Indiana State. And but you try to sell them with that aspect.
Speaking of the NFL, by the way, Coach, your nephew, obviously Will Mallory, plays for the Colts, the tight end. He played collegiately at Miami, so I'm curious, does this mean family divided on who you're rooting for?
Well, if Will was playing, it would always be family first. If he was on the team, then I'd be in a real dilemma. But he's a Colt. He's an Indianapolis Colt, so I'm rooting for the Indiana Hoosiers 100%.
Okay, and then he still has to sit at the kids' table at Thanksgiving, right? Is that right?
No,
Especially now.
Tell him he's a grown up, but it's really neat because having Will close has been really fun. And of course, we have a guy that played at Indiana State, Jonathan Edwards, who's also with the Indianapolis Colts. So it's neat to see those two together.
We had Jonathan Edwards on the show at the beginning of the year, and instantly I was like, you know what? If I had to go out and buy a jersey, it might be that kid's, because he was a really impressive interview, really great story. Out of St. Louis, I believe, was his hometown, right?
That's correct. Just a wonderful young man, and we're all here so proud of him.
Finally, Coach, I will tell you this, and I don't know what compels me to do this, but every couple of months, one of my favorite videos in sport history, and I'm sure you've seen it. I was so fired up in 1987. I'm in the 8th grade. I'm all about IU football. My friend's dad was on the board of trustees, so we were able to go down to games, or grandfather actually, go down to games. And I was all in on IU football, big Hoosier fan. And I was so fired up for that game at Michigan State. Stoyanovich hits a 53-yarder. They go up 3-0. I'm like, they're going to the Rose Bowl. They're going to the Rose Bowl. Michigan State wins that game. And then during the Michigan State celebration, all of a sudden, Michigan State, you could hear, they're kind of like, what's going on? They look over and this like red sequin crimson jacket walks in. And your dad gives this speech that I'm thinking the Michigan State coaching staff's got to be like, that's a better pep speech than we could have given. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's arguably the greatest 2-minute video in the history of Bill Mallory, correct?
I was standing next to him. So what happened was we were coming off the field. We're walking up the tunnel. You go right to the visitors' locker room. We go left to the home locker room. He goes left. I said, Dad, it's this way. I followed him in. I'm standing at the doorwell watching that. I knew what he was going to do. I knew who my dad was, and I knew what he represented. And that came from the heart, and he meant what he meant, and he wanted them to go out there and represent the Big Ten and get the W.
And for those that don't know what we're talking about, it's exactly that. He went in during the Michigan State celebration, and I don't know whether or not it was that he said to someone, hey, I've got something to say, or whether they just figured out he had something to say. But the thing, Coach, to me that was the most impressive about it was when you watch that video, here are, 60, 70 young guys that play for Michigan State, and they literally all sat there and took a knee, and he had their undivided, hear a pin drop attention. And that's a football coach, right? That's a football coach.
No doubt. And it's just the respect that he had for them, the conference, and then the respect was mutual. Coach Perlis and they had for my father and their program. It was out of respect, and you felt that.
Well, should Indiana win on Monday night, and I don't want to jinx anything. I think they've got a very, 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 very good chance. But should they win on Monday night, and even if they don't, just being on that stage in this moment, I told Don Fisher, the two guys that I keep going back to and thinking about, Terry Hepner had the vision that this was possible, and Bill Mallory had the execution over his time there to plant the seed for it. So I certainly hope for you, your mom, Coach, and for your family, all but Will, I guess, that you're able to enjoy Monday night.
Well, there's no doubt. We'll be glued to the television and be rooting hard for them.
Coach, I appreciate it. We look forward to talking to you during the football season.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it. Kurt Mallory, the head football coach of the Indiana State Sycamores, and his father, Bill Mallory. Again, legendary coach at Indiana. The coach of the year in 1986 and 87 within the conference. He is the first Bill Mallory. He was the first man to be a back-to-back winner of the Big Ten Coach of the Year award, if you can believe that. And the winningest coach in Indiana football history, 69, 77, and 3. And they had a run there. And when you hear that, those numbers, if you weren't around then, jump out and you go, 69, 77, and 3. Well, you got to consider where they were when he got there. Sam White had been the head coach, was there for a year, changed the uniforms, bolted, and then went into the NFL. And Mallory took over. And in the first year there, the cupboard was pretty empty. And they went winless in Bill Mallory's first year. So they're right there. You look at the record itself. So after that, 69, 66, and 3. But the bowl games, for Indiana to go to a bowl game in that era meant everything. I mean, that was almost inconceivable. The All-American Bowl, which I'd have to look up where the All-American Bowl was played. I don't even remember where that game was played, but I know the Liberty Bowl was obviously in Memphis, Tennessee. The Polon Weed Eater Independence Bowl was in Shreveport, Louisiana. The Copper Bowl was in Arizona. And the Peach Bowl they went to twice in Georgia, obviously, in Atlanta. But it just was the fact that all of it was in no way, shape, or form before he got there even a possibility. And to go and to be playing against Florida State and Auburn and Tennessee and South Carolina and Baylor, to be in the mix and in the conversation of those things, huge kudos and to Bill Mallory. And just a principled guy's guy, straight-up football coach. Purdue is in action tonight on the round ball side of things. They'll be taking on the Iowa Hawkeyes. That game, 6:30 tonight. You can see it on the Big Ten Network. And, last night in college basketball, Iowa State, who I have not seen a lot of except for their game against Purdue, and they went into Allen Fieldhouse, one of, 5 unbeatens left. Bill Mallory's alma mater, Miami of Ohio, being one of them. Arizona and Vanderbilt and Nebraska. I think that's everybody. Michigan. No, Michigan lost, didn't they? Michigan just lost to Nebraska. But either way, Iowa State just had one of those games where, it sank on them quickly. And that's a tough place to play. Allen Fieldhouse, obviously Kansas has been down. Their best player was back last night, but then left again due to cramping. But Kansas, just one of those nights where everything went the way of Kansas. And, Iowa is one of those teams that can be that way. They can be tricky. But what are the challenges for Purdue? And what are the areas that Purdue, perhaps without us realizing it, has shored themselves up now as you get thick into conference play? We will talk about that and more. Bobby Riddell joins us next.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Purdue in action tonight. The Boilers hosting what I think might be a little bit tricky. And I will explain what I'm talking about with our next guest who joins the program. On the Java House Peel and Port guest line, he is a member of the Purdue Basketball Radio Network. Bobby Riddell joining us. And Bobby, Iowa, I think for any matchup for Purdue, you look towards it and you say, okay, advantage Purdue because they are loaded and they're fabulous and they're experienced and they have everything you're looking for. But Iowa's coming in on a little bit of a skid, yet at the same time, they are a sneaky tough opponent to me. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, first off, thanks, Jake, for having me on and talking some Boilermaker hoops. Yeah, I think this Iowa team is definitely a sneaky team because they play a little bit of a slower pace. You know, they limit the possessions. When you're a great offensive team like Purdue, you want as many possessions as possible, typically, as far as from an offensive standpoint, to be able to, let your great offense flourish. So with the way a team like Iowa can slow the pace down, granted, Purdue can also play, great half-court basketball and is fine playing a slower pace. Just the nature of the beast, when you have lesser possessions, there's, less variance, I feel like. And so this Iowa team is definitely a potential problem. They got a great point guard in their own right, and Bennett Sturts, the transfer from Drake, who was a phenomenal player last year at Drake, and preseason All-American, has looked the part so far this year with Iowa. And Purdue's going to have to be locked in with him. Defensively, Purdue's had some ups and downs this year. Both these teams rank very similar in defensive efficiency in the nation, I think 19th and 20th respectively. So both these defenses are comparable thus far. And Iowa's got a great coach, Ben McCollum. He's had a lot of success throughout the course of his career. So he's going to have his guys prepared. And just human nature, right? They've lost 2 games in a row. So they're going to be a little hungrier, going to be a little bit more desperate. And if Purdue's not able to kind of match that desperation, Purdue could be in trouble.
I'm going off of maybe a false perception here, Bobby, but Ben McCollum and the style of play that he typically has done has been kind of lull, slow you down, bloody knuckle type basketball. Maybe that's totally inaccurate. Is there some truth to that? In other words, is Iowa a team that will play a style that, if you're not careful, can take you away from what it is that you want to do?
No, I think you're spot on. I think that is a lot of his MO. I think offensively, a lot of what they preach is, move the basketball, don't take bad shots, work it side to side, use the shot clock to try to get a great shot. And the way defenses function more often than not is the more you make a defense play, the more you move the ball from side to side, the more actions you run, the more opportunity there is for a defense to have breakdowns. And then they seem to be that type of offense that really likes to capitalize and exploit a defensive breakdown. And those occur more often than not later in the shot clock when you make a team defend and fatigue and things of that nature start to settle in on that sort of possession. And he obviously has to have good players to execute that, but I think he does a great job coaching his team into, be patient, use the clock, run our stuff, and then eventually the other team's going to break down if we do what we're supposed to do throughout the course of a possession. And once they do, then we capitalize. And I think he's, had a lot of success with this formula. So he's probably somebody that feels very confident in it. And it's definitely a type of style that you don't see a ton. So we'll be interested to see how Purdue adapts to it tonight.
Bobby Riddell is the color analyst for Purdue Basketball Radio Broadcast, joining us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Boilers, Iowa tonight. Bobby, one of the things that I have always felt about elite teams, and I do think Purdue is an elite team, is that the true sign sometimes of a great team is that they find ways to win games when they don't have great nights. And they just, they're taken out of a rhythm, or they're kind of sleepwalking, and then yet they find a way. Has Purdue had those games this year?
Yeah, I think they have, and I think you're right. I think a great team is kind of able to win in a multitude of ways, can, win with its offense when the defense isn't quite there, or if the other team is hitting shots at a high clip. I feel like the Penn State game was kind of an example of that. I mean, we definitely had some breakdowns, no question, but I also thought Penn State had a really impressive shot-making type of game too. And instead of that, being our downfall, our offense was elite that night as well and was able to carry us to victory. And I think we've also had some performances this year where the offense was a little lackluster. The shot-making wasn't going down, but the defense and the rebounding and things of that nature were able to still allow us to come home with a victory. And so, yeah, I think this team can win in lots of ways. It's much more versatile than it was last season. And, that's the type of team you need to make a long run in March typically, is a team that can weather a bad shooting night, or at least, I don't think you can really have a horrific shooting night and win very often, especially when you get to the NCAA tournament and you're playing other good teams. But you can hopefully withstand maybe just a subpar shooting night as long as you do, a bunch of those other things that help you win basketball games. And I think this Purdue team is equipped to do that. So I think that's a great sign for this team. Last year's team, for example, it just kind of felt like if we didn't play great offensively, we were going to have a tough time beating, really good teams. And, this year's team, I think, has the opportunity to, win it in different ways.
With the Iowa State game, which I know now feels like ancient history, but I watched Iowa State last night, and they just went. You have games like this, Bobby, right, where you go in. I don't know if you watched Iowa State against Kansas last night, but just everything's going the way of one team, and the other one they're just every door's locked, right? Did Iowa State expose something about Purdue that others have tried to now replicate, or was it just one of those days?
A combination for sure. I was able to catch some of that second half last night between Iowa State and Kansas. I saw that halftime score, and I was like, well, I've seen Iowa State have some really impressive second halves this year. Of course, one in Mackey Arena against us, and then when they played their arch rival Iowa earlier this year, they also had a awesome second half comeback in that one. So I was like, I got to tune into this and see if they can pull off the comeback at Kansas. And they made a little run there, but eventually Kansas held on. And yeah, I think our game in Mackey with them was a combination of that, where I do think their style of play, I mean, obviously they're a good team. They got talent. They're well coached, got veterans. But I think their defensive style of play, was a good game plan that night. They were going to be okay with, some of Purdue's role players getting open shots, and we're going to live with giving up shots to those guys that weren't super high percentage shooters. And I thought they did a good job of executing that. Sometimes easier said than done, pulling that off. And unfortunately for Purdue in that particular night, some of those guys that aren't Purdue's go-to players did have off nights, shooting, relatively wide open shots. And, it was kind of a perfect storm where Purdue missed a lot of wide open shots. Granted, a lot of them were threes, and that was kind of by design by Iowa State's defense. They weren't going to allow Purdue to get a lot of easy shots in the paint. But Purdue did get a lot of open shots. They just didn't go down. And then to Iowa State's credit, they got scorching hot in the second half, and then it kind of was just a snowball effect, it felt like, where nothing's going our way, everything's going their way. And then, once you kind of get down double figures, then it felt like Purdue started to maybe do some uncharacteristic things. Got it down to 10 at one point, and then Momcilovic hit a really tough fadeaway shot along the baseline as the shot clock expired, and that kind of felt like it stole our soul there and tempered any sort of comeback we could pull off. But so tip of cap to Iowa State that evening, but I do think if we played them again, based on the quality of shot we got for a majority of the night, I do think it could definitely be a different story.
How would you assess the development and contribution to this point versus where you anticipated it being of Daniel Jacobson?
Man, he's been phenomenal. I've been really impressed with him. I was impressed with him in some of the small sample size I saw last year, so I'm not totally surprised to see him having the level of success he's having. Of course, he was making those USA, under 18, under 19 teams, and they don't just let any Joe Schmo, make those teams, of course. So clearly a guy who's got some ability and had caught the eye of those USA guys. So definitely when you're 7'4" with his sort of athleticism, he's got one of the better vertical jumps on the team. So he's a pretty good athlete. And then when you combine that with his size and the length, it's definitely a problem. And I feel like he's got pretty good hands, pretty good feel around the basket. He's got a nice jump hook. So, he's been a huge asset for this team. And it's such a luxury to be able to have him off the bench. You don't require him to take, the lion's share of the minutes in his first real college basketball season. He's able to kind of pick his spots, come in, give Oscar Clough a break here or there, impact games with his shot blocking, with his lob threat on offense. And, him and Braden, their connection continues to grow on that sort of pick and roll activity with him diving to the basket. So I've been really impressed with Daniel. He's not perfect. He's got some deficiencies. Needs to continue to get stronger, work on that lower body, his balance, things of that nature when he's dealing with contact in the paint. But yeah, I think he's got phenomenal upside and is obviously important piece of what Purdue is doing this year.
That is the voice of Bobby Riddell. You hear it on Purdue radio broadcast, Boilers and Iowa tonight. All right, Bobby, in the time that you've done radio, in the times that you were interviewed as a player, all of the times that you have broken down basketball games, I am now going to present to you the question that probably for the rest of your career you will say, I was once asked the dumbest question I've ever been asked on the radio. Are you ready?
Surely not.
I usually one-up myself with this stuff on the regular, but here it is. Braden Smith is now the all-time assist leader in Big Ten basketball history. And in watching him, oftentimes the passes that he makes, the velocity on the ball where he can reverse the ball, he can do different things, find guys in spots. There is obviously a symbiotic nature in which, whether it's Fletcher Lawyer or Trey Kaufman-Renn, where he anticipates where they're going to be. You played the guard position. Which of the following two things is the more impressive that makes Braden Smith so unique? Is it the vision to see things before they unfold and know where the ball needs to be versus where it is? Or is it actually the physical nature of the distribution of the basketball at the speed in which he can do it that makes him unique? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, I wish I had both. Honestly, as a player, my goodness.
Is it the dumbest question you've been asked?
No, it's not dumb because, I think it's both. I think you have to say both because I was clearly not even close to as good a player as Braden, but I was able to play guard in the Big Ten, and got, some minutes here or there and obviously was able to compete in practice every day against the likes of Robbie Hummel and Etuan Moore and Juwan Johnson, Chris Kramer, a number of quality Big Ten players. So it's the vision, it's the ability to see guys open, especially on the far side of the floor while you're dealing with pressure, while you're navigating ball screens, and you got 6'8" to 7 foot dudes high hedging you, and all the bodies. His ability to see guys open that are not necessarily one pass away, guys that are multiple passes away, oftentimes. Just one pass if you're able to make a skip pass like you can. That vision is incredible, and then the moxie and the confidence to be able to see it and then execute, want to execute it. So there's almost a second step. It's seeing it. It's then secondly having the confidence to pull it off, and then third, being able to physically have the attributes, the arm strength, the touch, the feel to be able to whip those passes around. It's all those things. It's unbelievable to me, some of the passes he attempts, and then when he does attempt them, he just puts it right on the money more often than not. He's incredible.
Has it changed? Has watching him and in doing games, broadcasting games he's playing, has it opened your eyes or changed the way that you can see the floor because you now better anticipate what he's anticipating?
Oh, no doubt. It just makes you watching, when he's got the ball, you start to find yourself kind of looking at different parts of the floor to see who may or may not be open than you would with a normal player. And that's definitely, I'll never forget a pass he made his freshman year, and that's when I knew he was unbelievable already, but we were playing at Florida State. So this was in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. So it would have been still pretty early in the season. He had already worked his magic out in Portland when we, won that tournament against Duke and Gonzaga. And so I already knew he was elite, but he had a pass. He was on the dribble, dribbling right in front of Purdue's bench. Caleb First was in the far corner on the opposite side of the floor, and Braden's dealing with some pressure from a 6'4", 6'5" athletic guy guarding him full court. He starts bringing it on the dribble in front of our bench, and in all-in-one motion just whips it with his right hand fully across his body, across court, and hits Caleb First right in the shot pocket, and he buries a three. And I had the perfect vantage point as I was sitting right next to our bench and just saw the whole pass unfold. And I was like, how in the world did he first off see Caleb, but then let alone, have the ability to execute it? And it's that type of pass that, he makes on the regular now. And, he's a special player. Been a joy to watch him. And, I wish I had half of his creative talent.
Listen, they got to bring you some joy if you got to sit next to Rob Blackman for 2.5 hours, right? I mean, there's got to be some trade-off, right? I mean, let's be real.
I mean, that's a huge trade-off for me.
Right.
Dealing with Rob, and he's the Indiana Broadcaster of the Year, so now his head is just getting,
it's the size of
so
Eddie's.
big.
Yeah.
And thankfully I have some quality basketball to watch while I deal with Rob.
Well, we appreciate the time as always. We will be listening tonight, Purdue and Iowa, Wednesday. Wednesday, I said that today is Wednesday. Tonight, 6:30, Big Ten Network is where you can see the game as well. Bobby, appreciate the time as always.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Jake. Thanks for having me on, and go Boilers.
Eddie, you played you keep playing the Wednesday Hump Day deal. Now it's stuck in my head. Today is Wednesday. Yes, in fact,
What I do?
Well, I was sitting here and I'm like, Purdue, Iowa, Wednesday. Well, yes, of course, Wednesday. That's tonight. Have you ever had one of those weeks where your day is thrown off?
It happened to me yesterday. Remember, because I thought yesterday was Monday. Because I had the extended weekend.
Yeah, and unfortunately Monday I kept thinking it was Tuesday, so my days are all thrown off here.
Yeah,
all thrown off.
Especially when we had the New Year's Eve off, New Year's Day off, and then we came back for that Friday show. I was not right for a week.
I kind of liked the working on January 2nd thing because it's always so tough to come back off of New Year's. And so doing the January 2nd deal to me was kind of nice because it was a slow re-entry back into life, if you will, as opposed to, I can't imagine taking 3 weeks off and then that January 5th has to be it's just depressing, right? So it's kind of nice to dip the toe in the water a little bit. Would the Colts have had an opportunity to dip their toe in the water of a coaching frenzy if they had not made a move? And is there a mistake in that? I don't think so. I think they made the right decision in keeping Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. Let me explain, though, because there's more to it than what I just said.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You're going with some golden oldies today, Eddie.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Making me feel old again? Is that it?
No.
Is there a theme for this?
No.
I like it. I mean, it's before my time, but everybody knows these songs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Ray's the best. Okay, couple of notes here before I get into the Colts discussion that I just mentioned. First off, if anybody besides me, and I think there are a lot, is watching the show Landman, you are not, correct, Eddie? Billy Bob Thornton on Paramount?
I have not.
Okay. If anybody is watching the show Landman and is caught up, I had made a prediction to someone about a month ago. I go, you know what? Here's exactly where I think this is headed.
Was it Mac Engel?
It was not Mac Engel.
Was it Jeff George?
It was. Yes. How did you know that?
I remember the last time we had Jeff George on. It might have been the last time, one of the two recent times. He may mention that if he's not, on the phone with you at 3 a.m. in the morning, he's watching Layman.
That's correct. So I said to him, I sent him a text and I said, here's what I'm predicting is going to happen. And in the latest episode, there is a curveball. There's a development in the show, an overcorrect of the wheel, if you will. And I thought to myself, okay, I think I was onto something. I think exactly what I predicted is happening. But other than Jeff, there's nobody that I talked to about the show. So if you are watching, and I have a couple of other observations about the show, if you're watching it, send me a text and let me know if you're caught up, because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. So that's number one. Number two, tonight, I will not be going to the Pacer game, taking on the Raptors, 7 o'clock at the Fieldhouse, because I'm excited about this. We're going to the MJ musical, the Michael Jackson musical.
Oh, on Broadway?
It's off Broadway, but yes, the Broadway show, yes.
Yeah. A friend of the show, Scott Agnes, went and saw that last night, I believe.
It's apparently pretty good, right?
I don't know.
So if you are going to that tonight, say hi.
Are you going with Shannon, or is this Emily Longnecker? Which wife are you taking?
Shannon's
the one that should be your wife, or the one that is your wife?
I'm Shannon's plus one for everything, so I ride along. I'm riding the coattails. Okay. Eddie, if you were an NFL coach,
ooh, that's scary.
If you were a coach like a Mike Tomlin or John Harbaugh, you're an established coach, and theoretically, you could have your pick of where you go. What would be what do you think would be the four most common factors that make a coaching job desirable?
Well, number one would be the quarterback. Do you have that position figured out? Like, is it a guy that, has talent? Is it a guy that you recently drafted? I need to continue to develop.
Okay. Number two factor?
Number two would be, what's the age of the roster? Am I looking at a younger roster that just needs the right sort of mentorship and teaching and coaching, or is it an older roster that's got some bad contracts that we're going to be
third factor
rebuilding with? Number three, it would have to be probably how soon are the expectations to win? Okay. Like, is it immediate, or do I have a couple years?
Okay. And then the last factor.
I could also see like the history of said franchise.
Okay.
Like, is there a history with them by trying to build something up for the first time?
Okay.
Et cetera, et cetera.
A couple of weeks ago, when the year came to an end, we had questioned whether or not the Colts would retain Chris Ballard, retain Shane Steichen, fire Chris Ballard and retain Shane Steichen, fire Shane Steichen and retain Chris Ballard, fire both, whatever it might be. All the factors. And I said, and have said all along, that I did feel like, and I know that change is hard, and I know that there's never really a good time for change. And you're always apprehensive. You're always a little bit nervous about a new venture or a big decision. And I understood the familiarity standpoint for Carly Ursay-Gordon of having, and the comfort level, the safety net of having a right-hand person with which she's familiar, which would be the case, obviously, with Chris Ballard. She has familiarity with him. She knows what he brings to the table. She's venturing into this new frontier as a CEO, and does she find comfort in that? And I understand all of those things, but was still saying that with 70, 78, and 1 and kind of the same song and dance, the same excuses, the same explanations year in and year out, with nothing against Chris Ballard from a personal standpoint, it seemed to me from a football standpoint like emphatically they needed to go ahead, because there's never a perfect time, and make the move. And yet, with the things that you just mentioned, I had not a change of heart, but an epiphany. I'll tell you about that, and we'll get back into why it is so important what's going to happen Monday night next. That's right. Because the image and the style that you have of the Colts, stop what you're doing because I'm about to ruin it. Okay? Even though I think realistically most of you have this image and this style of it. Look at the jobs that are open right now in the National Football League from a head coaching standpoint. The Baltimore Ravens, the New York Giants, the Miami Dolphins, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Arizona Cardinals, the Cleveland Browns, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Tennessee Titans, the Atlanta Falcons. Now, not all, but most of them, and I think Eddie's explanation of what a coach would be looking for are pretty accurate. Those four. Who's the quarterback going to be? What's the age of the roster? What's the sense of urgency? And what's the franchise history of stability? Most of the teams that are looking for a coach right now grade better than the Colts in at least 2, if not 3 or 4 of those categories. Eddie, give me a number again, 1 through 9. I have all 9 listed right here. Give me number 1 through 9.
8. I'll try to avoid the numbers I did earlier.
Number 8. Okay. Number 8 would be the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans have their quarterback, it would appear. They have the number 1 pick in the draft from last year in Cam Ward, who I think started to show a little bit of growth towards the end of the year. I believe, I could be wrong in this, they have a very young roster.
Mm-hmm.
I think because of the young roster and the young quarterback, you're going to be given probably 2 years before it's expected that you're going to be competing within, the division or whatever it may be. And you might be looking at the AFC South saying, boy, Houston and that defense is awfully good. And Jacksonville is showing some progress, but it's still Jacksonville. And Indianapolis seems to be treading water. So you would look at the division and say, okay, there's some, but then also just the franchise stability. I don't think that Tennessee, probably seen as a wash with Indianapolis. I don't think the Titans are seen as an erratic dumpster fire, but I don't think the Colts are either in that regard. But in that case, Tennessee might intrigue you a little bit. A little bit. Give me another team. Give me another number.
I will go with 4.
Number 4.
Number 4.
Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, don't have a quarterback. And they have a roster that probably is, they've got.
I think they have the oldest roster.
I was going to say they got some pieces that are aging out.
Yeah.
But you also know they've had 3 coaches in 58 years. Stability right there almost trumps everything else because if you go there, because of the fact that the roster is a little bit older and there's huge question mark at quarterback, that probably buys you minimum 2 to 3 years to get things rolling a little bit. And you have stability there. What I'm getting at is I don't know that this went into the line of thinking, but we right now have nine head coaching vacancies in the National Football League. And that is the second highest number at any given time in the history of the league, I believe. And perhaps the Colts looked at it and said, our quarterback situation is of question. We believe that Daniel Jones is our guy, but he is coming off a pretty devastating injury. He is also not under contract. We have a player that we drafted at the quarterback position that it looks like we are going to have to move on from. And we don't have a first-round pick the next 2 years. We have an older defensive end. We have an older guard. We have a slower linebacking core. And we have 2 really good corners. But it is possible that the Colts looked at it and said, this just simply is not the time to make the move because we're going to end up with a less than top tier coach or general manager, regardless of which situation they were going out and looking for someone. Because if you're a GM, you're going into a situation saying, well, I don't want to go into a spot where I'm inheriting the coach and I don't know the quarterback and then everything else that I just spelled out. I don't think that was the factor for Carly Ursay-Gordon. But if it was, I can understand it. Not saying I wouldn't have made the move and made a change at Chris Ballard, but I can understand it if there was that much foresight. And sometimes to look forward and look beyond the right now, you take a look back at precedent as I talk about, or you just look at recency and then you look at a year ago versus a year from now and where things are, where they're going to be, and et cetera. And maybe she did look at it and say, look, right now I'm up to my eye teeth and all kinds of stuff going on with being for the first time ever. And I know that she's been in the ownership role and been involved in everything else, but now that it is that she is essentially her father in title for the first time, maybe she looked at it and said, I just need another year to let dust settle a little bit. And I also anticipate that there are going to be other openings that are going to be very competitive towards finding the person that I think is the best for the job. And when people say, like, would Mike Tomlin come here to be GM or whatever, I think you got to look through that checklist.
I don't think Mike Tomlin's even going to be on.
He's going to be on television.
Yeah, I think he's going to go the Sean Payton route. He's going to be. He's dealt with so much BS the last 2-3 years in Pittsburgh with ownership, with fans, with roster. Like I think Tomlin is just in the mindset of, I just need a break. I need to sit back. I need to get my juju back. As Chris Ballard would put it.
He could be a stand-in for Omar Epps in movies.
Yeah. The other thing I would also add here, Jake, is something that was talked about by some of the NFL national insiders going into the final weeks of the regular season is that there didn't appear to be this big name or big names of candidates out there. You're like, that's the guy I've got to go interview. There's not a Ben Johnson in this group. There's not any of those premier coordinators that you know for a fact, that Kellen Moore, that are going to get their opportunity this upcoming cycle. Now it just seems like there's a lot of people that are getting interviewed because a lot of teams don't really know what direction they're going to go just yet.
Right. Understood. I mean, which way they're going to go, correct, right?
Like, Stefanski is going to end up somewhere. Harbaugh is going to end up somewhere.
And that, eventually Tomlin, whether it be TV or whatever, is going to end up with a job, right? Now, in terms of where you've been and where you're going, it goes back to something I mentioned earlier. Let me spell out what happened last night. Last night, I was caught up doing a couple of things.
You're not spelling it out, though, Jay.
And spilling. Am I spelling? LAST space NIGHT, comma, I. No, so last night I was doing a couple of things, and I finally, got done and sat down, and I opened my phone up, and I see a message that Indiana's in a tight game with Michigan State. And I actually thought to myself, and I'm embarrassed to admit this because I do a sports talk radio show in Indianapolis. I get it. But I thought I'd forgot that the game was already underway. And, they're in Michigan State. And I like Darren DeVries, and I like this roster. I went down for their opener, and I mentioned that I like a lot of the players that Indiana has. But I also grew up the most rabid Indiana basketball fan on the planet. There are people from the north side of Indianapolis that hated IU because of me. I've lost that fandom a little bit because I try to have an objectivity with what I do. And I've mentioned before, you just get kind of, Stephen Holder and I talked about it the other day on the air. You get kind of a desensitivity towards sport when you do what we do. It's the only drawback of this job. So I'm not like the rabid fan that I once was, but I know, I've got to be aware of and watch games and whatever else. And that's when I had the epiphany. I turned on the television because I saw that Indiana and Michigan State were in a close game, and right when I turned it on and boom, it pops up, and I look at it, and I put my glasses on, and I'm like, does that say 81-55? I'm like, or no, it might have been 84-55. I think it was a 29-point game. And just then the announcer says, Michigan State on that 26-2 run. And I mentioned this earlier. I heard that 26-2 run. And I'm looking at it, and I'm figuring out, and I'm subtracting and adding, and I'm going, okay, that means they were within 5 because now they're down 29. And the numbers are bouncing around in my head. They're bouncing around in my head like Alan counting cards in The Hangover. And then all of a sudden it hits me. 26-2. That's Curt Cignetti's record at Indiana. And then it hits me again. Tomorrow on the show, meaning today, going to have Kurt Mallory on, talk about that. Coming up later in the week, I've got to call into Michael Irvin. I have no idea whether or not that's ever going to come to fruition. And Clinton Portis will be on the show tomorrow from Miami. And I'm thinking about how so much time and effort and outline is going into Indiana and Miami in the College Football National Championship. The College Football National Championship. And that's when the epiphany hit me. We live in a world where now people multitask, probably more so than ever. But at the same time, in that multitasking, instead of 2 things that get 50% of your time each, you're doing like 10 that get 10% each. And it's harder and harder to juggle and find something to focus on more than one thing at a time, per se. And I thought about Indiana fans, and I thought about the lack of buzz about Indiana going up to play Michigan State. And then it hit me. I think that Indiana basketball fans, in combination of a number of things, the football program doing what it's doing, but also the hindsight of if Indiana would have simply severed ties with Mike Woodson a year earlier, they could have had their shot with Dusty May. I'm not saying that's factually what was reality, but I'm saying in the mind of an Indiana fan, you're looking at it and you're seeing Michigan right there dominating college basketball, just getting their first loss, making it through December unblemished, and then dropping a game but being right there at the top, and Dusty May, their coach, and thinking about Indiana and what Curt Cignetti was able to do in just 2 years, and I think so many Indiana fans are looking at it saying, if we just could have had Dusty May and Curt Cignetti, we could literally be at the top of the polls in both sports simultaneously, but we had to sit around on our hands and dilly-dally around and wait for the right time to part ways with Mike Woodson and not do what was the obvious, but rather do with what was safe and convenient and nostalgic. And here we are. And I think that delay in doing it, combined with, and I think Darren DeVries is a good coach, but we don't know a lot about him. And the combination of, and then the transfer portal and all of these players that, I think Lamar Wilkerson's a very fun player to watch. He's a lightning in a bottle guy. But, and Connor Enright plays hard and gritty and whatever else. There's likable players on the roster. But half the time still you're like, now is that the Elon guy, or is that the Stephen F. Austin guy, or is that the Drake guy? I can't remember. Which one came from DePaul? That's right. Et cetera. And so all of that factored in just made me come to the epiphany that, yes, it is not a trend that means that it's permanent. But at least for the right now, it has completely shifted. And I never, ever, ever thought I'd say it, where Indiana basketball fans are now prioritizing emotionally and financially to the football side. And I think there are Indiana basketball fans that are diehard drive-through sleet storm in February to go watch games on a Tuesday night at 8 o'clock at Assembly Hall and sit in the balcony. There are those fans that are now, the balconies are empty, and they're like, yeah, I'm not going to drive down because I'd forgotten the game was even being played tonight, or whatever it may be. And that's not to poo-poo Indiana basketball. I'm just saying, to me, I can't be the only one that realizes, like, all of a sudden before our eyes, there is a shift of emotional focus and investment. And yes, it's the national championship game, Jake, of course. I get it, of course. But moving forward, it almost feels like Indiana fans now moving forward, if given their choice financially of investing season tickets or whatever it may be in one versus the other, that it's now like, no, I'm all in on the football thing because they're not going away, and the future only looks brighter and brighter and brighter. And the basketball side, I don't have the 10% there because I'm prioritizing more than 10% over here. And as I was thinking about all of it, and I was watching it, and I was thinking to myself, and then I was thinking about the journey of Indiana basketball. And in thinking about the journey of Indiana basketball, what I thought about was, yes, there have been great moments. Tom Crean got them ranked number one. They had the Watt shot. I get that. They went to the Sweet 16. I understand that. They beat Kentucky in the tournament. I get all that. But really, the high mark in the last 25 years was that miracle run in 2002, where they beat Duke, and it was unbelievable. And the block from A.J. Moye of Carlos Boozer and Coverdale hitting that backup of Duhan and all of that in 2002. And then they get to the title game, and Jared Jeffries gets a putback, and you're looking at it thinking, I cannot believe that 2 years removed from the firing of Bob Knight, Indiana is on the brink here of winning the national championship and leading Maryland with 6 minutes left in this game. And then Maryland comes back and obviously wins. And then I got to thinking about all of the teams that we root for in Central Indiana. Butler basketball, Purdue basketball, Purdue football, the Colts, the Pacers, all of it. And the Colts had their moment, obviously. Peyton Manning hoisting the Lombardi, rainstorm in Miami, unbelievably awesome. But Jim Irsay had said multiple Lombardis. Not about Star Wars numbers, but multiple Lombardis. And they had the chance for the second, and you saw what happened with the Hank Basket onside kick and the Tracy Porter pick, and the the Colts were right there on the cusp. The Colts were right there on the cusp. They got to the top of the mountain, but then they couldn't get that last step over the ice in that last go-round of it. Butler basketball, an unbelievable story in going to back-to-back Final Fours. Who in the world would have ever anticipated that? An unbelievable story for Butler basketball. And Gordon Hayward with his half-court shot that nearly went in, and the incredible nature of what they nearly accomplished. But it was right at the mountaintop, and they couldn't get that last step over the ice. Purdue goes to the Final Four. Zach Edey's team, and they go up against, at no fault of theirs, a team that was as precise and red hot as you're going to find in Connecticut that year, and they got right there to the top, and they couldn't get that last step over the ice at the top of the mountaintop. And then it goes without saying, we all know with the Pacers that if Tyrese Halliburton does not get hurt, they win that game. We all know it. And that was an awesome run. And I will forever be grateful for the rest of my life on the joy that was brought in that out of nowhere, unexpected run for the Pacers and the winning so many of those games and the final minutes and the game-winning shots and all of it. It captivated the hearts of all of Indiana. Because once again, we were right there, and everybody was talking about, man, Indiana is the place to be. You got Purdue, the number one team in college basketball. You got the Pacers right here in the finals. You got the Colts that all of a sudden, the first half of this year were 7-2 or 7-1 and 8-2 and the number one seed in the AFC. Indiana is rocking, baby. And yet each time, the fever, another one, Caitlin Clark gets injured. And the team is decimated by injury, and they just keep putting in new pieces, and then boom, before you know it, right on the brink of a championship, couldn't get that last step over the ice at the top of the mountain. It's as if we can't have nice things in Indiana. I'm not saying it's a curse. I'm not saying it's some sort of a hex that's been put on Indiana sports, because we've been very fortunate. But for Butler fans that are trying to recapture that glory, Thad Matta trying to recapture that glory. For Purdue fans, golden opportunity, fabulous team this year. Matt Painter trying to get back to the Final Four and get that final step that eluded them really almost at no fault of theirs in that championship game where Edey was brilliant, but Connecticut was brilliant times 5. For Colts fans, like I just mentioned, for pace, for all of it, this is the chance for now an Indiana team to go in and get it done. Once again, the least likely of any of them, Indiana football. And I think it's going to be tough. The more that I think about this game, it feels like fait accompli that Indiana is going to go in there and absolutely roll Miami. Because is Miami better than Alabama, who Indiana eviscerated? Is Miami better than Oregon, who Indiana embarrassed? Is Miami better than Ohio State? Well, yes, because they beat them. And that's where I get my pause. Just when I think that Indiana is going to go out there and it's going to look just like what we've seen before. They're going to score quickly. They're not going to make mistakes. They're going to take a 7-point lead into a 10-point lead into a 17-point lead. And then all of a sudden you're going to be looking on social media and national prognosticators are going to be like, look, they don't take their foot off the gas, guys. This game's just going to keep going this way. The avalanche is going to continue. Just when you're starting to think that's how it's going to go. I give it pause only because I know that Miami's the 10 seed. I know that Miami lost to Louisville and SMU. But to say that you hold against Miami that Louisville and SMU are the reason they can't win this game is the same as saying that it'd be like saying, well, Indiana can't win because they struggled against Penn State and Iowa. That's a lifetime ago. The reality is that Miami and what Mario Cristobal has done with this team is relied on the defensive nature of their front four, where they have a couple of surefire first-round picks right there, okay? That's number one. Number two, they can control possession. And they did it against Ohio State. Indiana against Ohio State played brilliantly. But late in the game, Ohio State still has a field goal that could have potentially taken that into overtime or whatever it may be, and Indiana's maybe on their heels at that point. Ohio State against Miami controlled that game and was up basically 2 scores for the better part of that game and kept the ball out of that Ohio State offense's hands, and they took ball control and defense. Now, they do have an ability, does Miami, to make the mistakes that turn the ball over that gives Indiana then the puncher's, not the puncher's chance, that gives Indiana the advantage.
Especially Carson Beck with his right arm.
Correct. I mean, Carson Beck they have had penalty errors and turnover errors. Indiana so far in the postseason, not a single turnover. And they've taken away the ball 4 times from the opposition in 2 games. All things point towards this being a fabulous and brilliant night for Indiana football. But I'm just saying, the more I think about it and the more I break it down, the more I realize Miami is here for a reason. But my long-winded point is that each team in this market, each team that we focus on, each team that we cover on in a number of different sports and gender, all have gotten right there and have captivated all of us. And for whatever reason, more often than not, almost at no fault of the team or the franchise or the moment itself, the Indiana representation is the one that has come away wondering what if. And that's why the most unlikely of all of them is the one that I think breaks the hex and just says, you know what? We're taking the final step over the ice. We're atop of the mountain. And Indiana would win the national championship. And as I said earlier, if you're a fan of Notre Dame, who got to the title game and got blown out by Alabama, who got to the Final Four of the play, well, I mean, last year, right? Got to the title game last year, got beat by Ohio State. If you're a fan of Purdue, as I mentioned from the basketball standpoint, Butler basketball, whatever it might be, I totally understand rivalries. I totally understand hating and finding it totally against your nature to root for anybody wearing the uniform or the colors of your rival. I get it. But sports unifies the masses like no other, and we've seen it in this town. People that have differences in other areas all coming together to jump in unison when Tyrese Halliburton hits an unbelievable shot. People that have differences otherwise and normally see somebody across the street that they don't like and they don't like the sign the guy's putting in his yard or how late he leaves his Christmas lights up or whatever else, but you're jumping in unison because you both watched Purdue finally break through and get to the Final Four, whatever it might be. This is the moment, once again, of camaraderie, which I know is ridiculous, and I know that I'm speaking something that is never going to happen for many people that root for Purdue or Butler or Notre Dame. But I would say the same thing if it was one of those teams that had the opportunity here when you look at the way that Indiana sports fans, what we've been through in the last couple of years. That we all should collectively come together and Hoosiers in unison and en masse collectively as a people from a state that are pretty darn sports proud and deserve their flowers. Rhett Lewis going to join us other side. Is that correct, Eddie? Rhett Lewis joins us, Big Ten Network, continuing to break down and analyze what Indiana is going to need to do to make all that a reality next.
is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The last time Rhett Lewis was on, we talked about just the incredulous nature for all of us from different angles of absorbing that Indiana was, at that time, 2 wins away from a national championship. They are now a win away, and when you look at the way that they dominated Oregon, you have to feel very good about it. But Miami is no slouch, and don't fool yourself because they lost twice this year, especially the way that they're playing now. Rhett joining me back once again on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Of course, Rhett Lewis from, you see him, Big Ten Network, NFL Network. Hear him on this radio station as well. And Rhett, the more that I look at this, I am very confident of Indiana and their preparation. You would be a fool to dismiss Kurt Cignetti's work in that regard. But Miami's pretty darn stout, and that defensive front four is very impressive to me. Your overall assessment now as you look further into the Canes.
Yeah, man. It's what's up, Jake? And thanks for having me back on, man. Excited to chat with you guys. I agree with you. The thing that's different is they're much simpler in their approach, and that's because they've got absolute dudes up front, right? Especially containing number 4 is of the utmost importance. Now, I will say that Oregon was no slouch either. They had the best defensive tackle in the draft, like the number 1 D tackle in the draft, and number 52, Amari Washington, but he decided to go back to school for another year, which was somewhat inexplicable until you start watching the tape and you see Bray Lynch and Pat Coogan and Drew Evans kind of push him around a little bit in this last game of the Peach Bowl. So Indiana has faced high-level defensive talent a bunch this year, and this will be the stiffest test yet, I believe. I think they kind of rush a little bit like Ohio State did. There's not as much movement up front with stunts and twists and that sort of thing. So it's really about, hey, our dudes, they think their dudes are better than your dudes, and you got to prove them otherwise.
When you look at Miami and what they did, the game that I keep going back to, Rhett, is Ohio State. And I know that they got a quick score in that game defensively, but once they got out to that lead against the Buckeyes, they were able to keep Ohio State at bay, not just defensively, but also through kind of a ball control offense of keeping the ball out of Ohio State's hands. Is that of concern for Indiana? And by that, I mean getting the football back and not allowing Miami to kind of take you out of rhythm and get you off kilter a little bit.
Well, yeah, look, the one thing that Indiana's been able to do is stop the run. That is like priority number 1 for Brian Haynes' defense. And then off that, they get after the passer because they put you in situations that are not advantageous as an offense. So that will obviously be key, is finding a way to slow down that run game. And then, it's like, all right, how do we keep the ball out of Malachi Tony's and not let him just run all over the field? So open field tackling and obviously stopping the run are 2 things that are going to be huge. Indiana missed some tackles, Oregon, more so than they had in the previous couple of games. So I think that's something to kind of watch in this one. But I think there's ways they do such a great job at finding ways to stop the run and putting guys in position, to make tackles. Mikhail Kamara might have played his best game of the season against Oregon. I look at the work, even Daniel Ndukwe, right? We talk about him for the 2 sacks and the strip sack and the punt block, but he had a couple of good run fits that allowed other guys, kind of created some havoc that allowed, other guys to go in and make stops. So while that is the strength of Miami, I think it's a strength of Indiana too. And then let the chips fall where they may.
When you look at Indiana defensively, and And Rhett, if you could kind of elaborate on this for people, because even myself, I realize that not everybody listening is sitting around in a war room, right? Indiana doesn't go defensively, and you tell me if this is even an inaccurate assessment, okay?
Yeah.
Indiana doesn't line up of saying, okay, I've got number 10, and wherever he goes, I've got to flank him.
Right.
It almost is more of, I have an area of the field that I'm responsible for, and I have a great trust that my teammate who is responsible for the area next to him is locking off his as well. And if we both seal off this area, then boom, it's hard to move the football against us. Is that a safe explanation of it? And what is it that Indiana does that makes them so stout in that area of just seemingly always knowing where the ball is going?
Well, that's the power of D'Angelo Pons, because he's your boundary corner. So if you separate the field, if the field, the ball's on one hash, D'Angelo Pons is on the short side, right? And then you're able to kind of get creative and send more defenders into the wide side of the field, right? The opposite side from Pons. And you're able to do that because you feel confident in Pons' ability to handle what's going on the short side of the field. Then you can you got Jamari Sharp, you've got, sometimes you'll have, Devin Boykin will be over there. You might put a defensive lineman back into the short area on the wide side of the field. You've got Amari Farrell over the ton, that's Lou Moore, depending on how they've kind of called it and schemed it up. And so, Pons' ability to handle what's happening on one side allows you to focus more attention on the other and to send more guys to that side of the field to kind of handle it. And that really bothers quarterbacks because they have to hang on to the football for a little bit longer than they'd like to wait for guys to get open, to see if they're even going to get open at all. Then they're either scrambling or they're getting sacked and pressured and throwing it away. So really, like, the linchpin is D'Angelo Pons, truly.
When you look at Indiana offensively, Rhett Lewis is our guest, Java House, Peel and Pour guest line. Fernando Mendoza, obviously, it goes without saying. I mean, his ball placement is incredible. He puts the football oftentimes where only the receiver can get it. But, Rhett, how much of that is facilitated by Charlie Becker, Elijah Surratt, and Omar Cooper Jr., notably those three guys, never single dropping a pass? I mean, how hard, for a guy that has only been here for a year, how hard is it to develop that sort of a chemistry and timing?
Look, it's time on task, as with anything. I fear not the man who has 10,000 kicks, but the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And they have repped this stuff over and over and over and over again with Fernando, going back to the moment he signed. And I think you could see that chemistry on the back shoulders with Surratt, on the deep balls with Becker, on some of the anticipatory throws we've seen with Omar Cooper, especially on that kind of two-man combo he ran on the out route for the first offensive touchdown for Indiana. Like, that ball was out of Fernando's hands before Omar even made the move to the outside. Like, he knew, there's a trust that's built there. It's not just like, okay, I understand where you're going to be, but I trust where you're going to be. And they've proven that. And Fernando's got his trust and confidence in these dudes is absolutely sky high right now. It's really incredible to watch. On that touchdown to Becker, the long one, he's lined up against the best corner on the field there, in Brandon Finney, and he wins with his release. And once he wins with his release, Fernando's like, oh, boom, we got this, and the ball's out, and it's over the top, and Becker goes up and makes a great catch. So there's a lot that goes into it. You got to have some pretty good protection, too, and I thought Indiana did a terrific job protecting Fernando on the whole. And then when protection broke down, he made those big scrambles, right? Scramble for 20, and found a way to get crucial first downs in those types of situations also.
The strength of Indiana that will be the hardest for Miami to offset would be what?
Say that one more time.
The strength of Indiana that Miami will have the biggest challenge trying to offset would be what?
Yeah, I think it is the receivers, because you're talking about a group that is 4 deep now. I mean, E.J. Williams' route, his double move, in stick and shake on that last touchdown that Fernando threw. I mean, I think it was 42. Maybe I lost track of just how many touchdowns it was at that point. But and especially because one of their top corners is out for the first half with the targeting. So I wouldn't be shocked if Indiana really tries them through the air, especially in the first half, knowing they're down a corner and they got to deal with 4 really talented, athletic receivers who go up and get the ball, in any situation. So that's something that I think, at least, particularly in the first half, that they'll have a little bit of difficulty dealing with.
Okay, the vulnerability area for Indiana that Miami will try to exploit.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you look at the right offensive line. They've had some trouble there, but I thought Khalil Benson at right tackle played one of his best games this past week against Oregon. But pass pro, they're trying to collapse the pocket and make Fernando uncomfortable. I think on the left side with Carter Smith, feel really good about that. Pat Coogan, Drew Evans, thought they've done a really nice job. If the right side holds up, because it broke down a little bit against Ohio State in that Big Ten championship game, and they had to move some guys around in there. But I think that's something that I would kind of be watching for.
Okay, quickly then, other way. Miami's strength that Indiana could have concern about or will try to offset would be what?
Yeah, I think it's open field tackling. It's getting the ball, to the athletes in space where they can utilize some of that elite talent that we talk about with Miami's team. And obviously Tony's the big one there. Man, he is electric, right? And they get blockers out in front of him, allow him to kind of work behind some of those guys and find seams. That's Elijah Hardy and Isaiah Jones and Amari Farrell and Lou Moore. Got to have one of their best tackling games, in the middle of that, kind of, from let's say the numbers to the numbers where Tony can cut back and go for, explosive plays. They got to have one of their best games in that department. So I think open field tackling is certainly one of them. And then look, you got to be able to, if you're able to not shut down, but limit the run game, you're going to force Carson Beck into some mistakes. And so now if Miami is ripping off 4, 5, 6-yard runs at a pop, they can protect Carson Beck. And he's been playing pretty well in this college football playoff. So, and look, I think Tony and what I started off this answer talking about is kind of part of that too, because they can mimic the run game there. With what they do with some of those quick throws. So the ability to tackle and keep them off schedule will force some of the turnovers and things that we've seen Carson Beck do in some of the losses that Miami has had this year.
Which I think probably, Rhett, answers the final question, which is the vulnerability for Miami has been ball security, has it not? And just making sure that because Indiana's not going to make mistakes. And so you cannot afford to make one against Indiana. That, to me, would be the area that Indiana tries to exploit that is vulnerable for Miami. You agree with that?
I do agree. I do agree with that. I think there's a lot of different ways that this game can go, though, Jake. I really do. And they're gonna explore all avenues. They're gonna try to figure this thing out in a lot of different ways. And the one thing that I've been kind of excited about is that IU's found some wrinkles here and there in each of the last 3 games, right? The biggest games of the season. And they put stuff out there that we haven't necessarily seen all year. And I would imagine we see a little bit of that. I think we might see a little bit of more D'Angelo Ponce on offense because that was really, that was not just a gadget play. Like that was a really well done play out there down in the red zone, where he was able to come up with the with that conversion. So, the coaching chess match is pretty cool here. The connections are obviously obvious with Corey having coached for Kurt Signetti, defense coordinator for Miami now. There's a lot to chew on with this one for sure.
Rhett, we appreciate the time as always. It's going to be a ton of fun, a lot of things to break down, and perhaps we'll be talking to you afterwards celebrating an Indiana championship, but we shall see, right?
Let's do it. Thanks, right, brother.
Appreciate it. Okay. Rhett Lewis joining us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. We come back. There is a little bit of breaking news. I've always talked about how Indiana kind of breaks the will of teams. Did they change the mind of one player? We'll explain next. Hey there, Jake Query for Surfside. Look for the can with the sunset stripes.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Man, I love this. Got a text here from an entire family from the Pacer run wearing Why Not Indiana t-shirts. Love it. Eddie, do you have the breaking news sounder? I will let you break the news that you just informed me of when it comes to college football.
During your conversation with Rhett Lewis, Dante Moore was holding a press conference in which he announced that he will be going back to Oregon. He will not be entering the 2026 NFL draft, Jake, which assuredly means that Indiana's quarterback, assuming Fernando Mendoza decides to forego his final year of college eligibility, will be the number 1 overall pick.
What this says, I know it's easy to say, well, Indiana put such a sour taste in his mouth that, he doesn't want that to be his last experience in college. What it means is this, and I have no idea what the circumstance is with Dante Moore with NIL money. But we are now entering into, or are officially in, the era where a player can make more by going back. The kid at Ole Miss, Trinidad Chambliss, I mean, there's a reason he is, willing to go to the Supreme Court to try to get eligibility back for another year, because he probably has the opportunity to make $3 or $4 million. And in this case, I would bet that Dante Moore probably, when you factor in, the Nike money, whatever it might be, is probably going to get, I would assume 4. Mendoza got, 3.5 from Indiana this year? So you can imagine what Dante Moore would get from Oregon, and it's probably more than the rookie scale for your rookie year in the NFL. So,
I also wonder what this means for Dylan Raiola, because he just announced yesterday he was going to Oregon after entering the transfer portal. So, does he sit out a year now and just sit behind Dante Moore? I think this is the right decision for Dante Moore in general.
I would agree with that.
He's only had 18 starts in college, and just some of the recent quarterbacks that have gone into the NFL with fewer than 20 starts, you're not going to find a lot of success stories. It's Anthony Richardson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Kyler Murray, Dwayne Haskins, Mitch Trubisky, Ryan Tannehill, and Cam Newton. Out of that grouping, Cam Newton by far had the best career.
And I thought some of the mistakes and the turnovers that took place were not on him, to be honest with you. I just think the timing, having a freshman back in the backfield, a couple of the missed time on hand, just timing aspects in general. But Dante Moore back at Oregon for next year. J&B has arrived. The crossover is brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air and gals. Love-HVAC.com is the website. 317-353-2141 is the telephone number. John, you got a loaded one lined up today, right?
Loaded one. Who's on the show? Do you know more than I do? Oh, yeah, Billy Corbin. That's Corbin, right. The director, is on today. That's good, from South Florida. Babe Laufenberg, former Hoosier quarterback.
Down in Dallas now, right?
And does he still do the Dallas Cowboys radio network stuff, too?
I think he might have just retired. I thought.
He's on today, and Adewale Agunleye back on today. Got some receipts.
The best Don Fisher ever, right? Oh, I want a lick from Adewale and Goulier. It's the perfect Don Fisher name.
It is.
Yeah, so school me again on the receipts that I heard you mention this on the radio that Adewale and Goulier is bringing.
Apparently, over his NFL career, he was always made fun of. He was a bit of a laughingstock at times in the locker room with other players because they went to a college program that wasn't the most losingest in college football history. And evidently, he has kept receipts on all those names. And he told us last week that if IU advanced to the national championship game, he would name names.
Okay.
And that's what I'm all about right here is naming names. Hey, by the way, too, you mentioned IU basketball. Are there similarities between how we started watching IU basketball this season with the way that they blew the doors off of Marquette to the way that the season started for the Colts? We saw something that maybe truly
fool's gold.
Yeah, because IU last night looked like they're not even close to being tournament worthy. Anything like that. I mean, they may be for 20 minutes of time or 18 minutes of time.
Their best win right now is Kansas State, which is probably not a tournament team, right?
And last night, you hang in until you can't. And, man, when the floor caves in on that team, it caves in a big way quick.
If shots aren't dropping for them,
yes.
that's the problem, right? And Tucker DeVries, Eddie mentioned, I mean, when he dips down, then you're really in trouble. I do like Wilkerson because he can get his own shot. But, I mean, if their shots aren't falling, they're in a world.
DeVries is broke as a joke in the last how many games now?
4 of the last 6, I think.
He has not looked good, not shot it well, and he can't guard anybody. So if he doesn't shoot it well, it's really tough to be out there because he can't guard you.
By the way, I took a picture of you taking a picture.
Did you really? I don't know who it is as of yet, but they did it again. If it's somebody that signs my checks, I'm probably going to call off the dogs on this one. But if it's not, I thought I was gonna park a promotional vehicle right on top of the driver's side door.
Okay, so what we're talking about, there's somebody that we have a very tight parking spot, and there's somebody who backs their car in, straddling over, taking 2 spots, right? And I tried to line my car up alongside it in the small space that was available so the person couldn't get in their car, but I couldn't. But yeah, I've got a picture of you taking a picture
right there. Hey, by the way, too, I know Todd Meyer didn't want me to do this, but Matt Hibbelin said I could. So 1070 a.m., we're utilizing that signal right now.
Right.
And I was curious on my way in. I could get it. I got you loud and clear from Bargersville.
Really?
I'm curious if you're out, how far out of Indianapolis, where we are right now, can you get us on 1070 a.m.?
I was up on the far north side yesterday and tried it when you were on and didn't get it.
It's like 250, I think, in watts. So it maybe it's better south than it is north. But was it dark? Because if it's
it was like 4:30 or 5.
If it's night pattern time, then it decreases rapidly,
right,
as we used to know right there. But I would just love, because I remember back in the day when the MS folks told us just how useless it was, and we know what their words about right there. So, great.
J&V continues to fight the 1075. So, but what's funny though? How many people though, John, when we're out and about, say to you like, "Oh yeah, from 1070 the fan"?
Well, and it's because of the history. I mean, It is all about history. It's not like 700 WLW said, "Oh, you know what? We can't do this anymore, so let's just go ahead and drop our long storied history." So it was silly to do then, and it's silly not to embrace now.
All right, John is up next, and we will be back with you. Clinton Portis, you said tomorrow, Eddie, is that right? Taylor Tannenbaum, I believe, as well. And we will continue talking about Indiana and Miami.
Michael Jackson.
Will also recap.
PYT. Is he going to do PYT? Are they going to do PYT in that little musical tonight?
I hope so.
There are some awkward Michael Jackson songs when
I hope one of these
today.
something.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
What's more awkward, keep it in the closet or PYT?
I mean, listen, or the fact that Sweet Caroline, Neil Diamond wrote it about Caroline Kennedy, and she was like 11 at the time. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, what? But I'll give you a full
Benny
recap.
Mardonis into the night stuff right there.
We'll recap Pacers Raptors tomorrow as well. I thank you for listening to Query and Company.